All right, guys, today I'm going to make all your dreams come true. I'm going to do a shootout with the Mesa MKVII and the JP-2C+. Let's get started. Well, thanks for joining me for today's video. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank Motor City Guitar for allowing me to take the new MKVII home so I can do all these videos for you guys. And if you're interested in the MKVII or the JP, click the link in my description and give Motor City your business. I mean, there's an affiliate link there. They ship anywhere in the continental US and get a great deal on an awesome piece of gear. If it wasn't for Motor City Guitar, I wouldn't be able to do these videos, so I really appreciate that store and the owner and the staff very much. All right, so here's how this is going to go. I'm going to start out by shooting out the 2C mode in the MKVII against the JP-2C+. I have them set up exactly the same with the graphic EQ and the preamp EQ knobs as well. We're going to start out with just seeing how they both sound with the graphic EQ engaged, and then I'm going to turn the graphic EQ off on both amps so that you can hear how the preamp compares in both amplifiers in that mode as well. And then I'm going to switch the MKVII over to Mark IV mode and shoot that out against the JP-2C+ with the same settings and just see how they compare. And then as a bonus round at the end of the video, I'm going to shoot out the Mark V 25 in the Mark IV mode against the Mark IV mode in the MKVII. It takes like 800 takes to get all these little statements right because it's Mark this and Mark that and Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. I'm sick and tired of saying Mark. It's getting ridiculous. Anyway, so let's get started right now with the 2C mode between these two amplifiers. And the cab I'm using is the Mesa 212 with vintage 30s in it, and the mics I'm using are the Royer 121 paired with the SM57, blended together. And this is how you can tell which amp I'm playing. When you see the JP appear on the screen, that means I'm playing that. When you don't see it on the screen, I'm playing the MKVII. So here's how both amplifiers are set up. They're identical. Okay, so I have the 2C mode engaged on the MKVII, and here's how the preamp is set up, and here's how the faders are set up in the graphic EQ. They're set up exactly the same. I went through hell getting this to sound exactly, you know, or at least the settings to be exactly the same. So, all right, so let's get started now and see how these compare. They are extremely close. There's a little bit of difference with the high mids and a little bit of the top end. Now, full disclaimer, these faders are extremely powerful and touchy. So maybe, you know, just a nudge here and there on the faders, I can get them to sound exactly the same, but they're close enough to where I think, you know, it's pretty much a almost dead ringer. You know, I mean, they pretty much sound like twins. You know, and the feel is the same. Now, the one thing I will say, though, is that the JP has more gain, because you could pull the gain knob and actually get another level of gain in the JP. So if you want more gain, the JP definitely has that. And that's definitely a benefit I think the JP has over the MKVII. Also, with the JP regarding the MIDI, you can switch everything on the amp, including all the little switches and everything on there. So you can assign different EQs and all that stuff, shred mode, all that stuff with the JP via MIDI, where with the MKVII, MIDI controls the channel changes, but not the little switches. So there's a benefit. And the benefit with the JP is you also get 2 graphic EQs. They don't stack though. You don't stack them on top of each other. You can just assign the EQs to whatever channel that you want. And how I have it set up is channel 1 and channel 2 share the same EQ. So my clean and crunch channels share the same EQ, and my lead channel has its own EQ because I want the leads to be a little bit warmer. And bump the mids a little bit and bring down the highs in my leads to warm them up a little bit. And that's another big benefit with the JP is you get the 2 graphic EQs that you can assign to whatever channel that you want. So as far as tone sculpting, I think the JP will definitely have more tone sculpting options because of the dual EQs. So let's play a couple more riffs between these two, and then I'll turn off the graphic EQs on both of them and show you how the preamps compare. So I've been using the Mud Killer pedal in all of these riffs so far. So let's go ahead and disengage the Mud Killer now and see how they compare without a boost pedal engaged. Okay, so in that shootout, there was a slight difference in tightness. The Mark VII was just a hair tighter. It was subtle, but noticeable. All right, so this is how I have the amp set up right now, and the treble is here. And if you noticed in my previous video, when you crank the treble on this amplifier, it tightens up and gets more aggressive. So I'm gonna do that on both amps now and see how they compare when I do that. I want to see if that trick is in the JP. I've never tried that on the JP, which is kind of odd, but let's go ahead and try that now. I'll show you what I'm doing here, and I'll tighten them both up and see how they sound. Okay, it does work with the JP, and that's actually pretty cool. But the JP still has more low end, and it's a little looser than the Mark VII when I tighten it up with the cranking the treble knob. But it still does get more aggressive. So let me do some fine tuning on that and see how I can adjust for that. All right, I just zeroed out the bass. Maybe the JP's got a little more low end than the Mark VII, so maybe that's just the way it is with the transformers or the preamp or whatever, but let's compare them now. Okay, so without the boost engaged and the treble knobs cranked all the way up, the JP's a little looser. Actually, the Mark VII is a little tighter, which is surprising. Wow, and I have the base up around just under 9 o'clock on the Mark VII. So let's turn the base all the way down on the Mark VII and see if it even tightens up more. All right, so yeah, the Mark VII is tighter. It's definitely tighter, and it's becoming less subtle to me as I do this. That's interesting. That's really freaking interesting. But there's an interesting thing about the JP-2C Plus. It has shred mode, which really tightens the amp up even more. So let's engage that and see how that changes the JP, it tightens it up more, and then I'll compare the JP with the shred mode engaged with the 2C mode on the Mark VII. I just learned something new today. Holy crap. I have not really used the shred mode on the JP because I've always boosted it with an overdrive pedal. The thing I learned today is if you want the most out of your JP amp and you want to just not use a boost pedal at all, crank the treble all the way up and then engage the shred mode, and I'm not kidding you, it just breathes a whole new different kind of fire. I mean, it modernizes the amp even more, pushes it forward, and makes it a lot more aggressive. And as you heard between these two amplifiers, with the JP in those settings, for my taste, I actually prefer it over the 2C mode in the Mark VII. I still think the Mark VII sounds amazing, don't get me wrong, sounds killer. But that little secret weapon that's inside the JP gave it a little more gas. It was like a nitrous switch, and as soon as I hit that, the JP just pulled ahead of it, in my opinion. Yeah, that was actually really cool. I'm glad I'm doing the shootout. Every time I do the shootouts and amp comparisons and stuff like that, I learn something too. You know, I mean, you're watching me learn something on camera right now, and it's actually kind of a cool moment. Glad I could share that with you guys. So let's do a couple more riffs between these two. Again, the JP is in shred mode with the treble cranked all the way up, and the Mark VII doesn't have a shred mode, but I do have the treble cranked all the way up, and it basically is set up exactly the same way other than that. So let's do a couple more riffs. Well, yeah, the JP is definitely more aggressive. And again, no overdrive is being used right now. I have both amps set up in their optimal settings right now. And the JP is, if I had to pick between the two right now, the way they're set up, I would like the JP a little bit more because it's more aggressive. And if you guys watch my channel enough, you know that I love brutal, aggressive amps. Now, that's not saying that the Mark VII doesn't sound good. It sounds amazing. And in fact, when I play the Mark VII first with these settings, I'm like, oh, this thing just sounds incredible and feels incredible. It's awesome. And then when I switch to the JP, I'm like, yeah, but this is a little more aggressive. And I don't know, depending on your taste, you're going to prefer one over the other. But the JP might be a little too gnarly. Let me do this. Let me take the treble down a little bit on the JP and balance it out now that the you know, the shred mode's engaged. Might be a little overly done here with aggression. Let me see. Holy freaking crap. Yeah, I just took the treble down to, I don't know, like 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, right around there, and it balanced it out. It was a little snappy on the top end with it all the way up, but yeah, that just really sounds great, and I just learned a new way to dial in this amplifier today. You know what's funny is John Petrucci's still learning ways of, you know, new ways of dialing his own amp. I mean, he's posting stuff on Instagram all the time like, hey, I've been reading the manual and I learned this today. And so it's like, I get it, you know. I mean, there's so many cool options on these amplifiers, and if you embrace that, it's actually really cool. Some people complain like, oh, too many switches and knobs. It's like, dude, those switches and knobs mean something and do stuff. And it's kind of cool when you discover this stuff because it's almost like new amp day all over again, right? You're like, I didn't know that my amp did this. This is freaking kick-ass. And then you start messing around with it, and you fall in love with your amp all over again. It's just amazing. So I'm glad I'm sharing this stuff with you guys and learning this stuff on, I got goosebumps. I'm so happy to be sharing this stuff with you guys on camera because I'm learning stuff all the time. And I just learned some really cool stuff today. So yeah, I'd say that these are very good amplifiers, and they're pretty freaking comparable. You know, they really are. So I'd say if you have a JP, try those settings and let me know what you think. I think the JP is definitely, as far as aggression and a little bit more modern voicing and a little bit more response, I think, in my opinion, for my taste, is pulling ahead, but it's kind of a photo finish. You know, it might be a half of a car length, you know, ahead at this point. But I still think the Mark VII is having an excellent showing here. I really am. I mean, the bag of tricks that exists in both of these amplifiers is amazing. But I think the JP has a couple more tricks in its bag regarding the MIDI switching and some of the tonal options that you get regarding aggression and stuff. I mean, you're going to get more tones as far as different genres and stuff like that in the Mark VII, but I'm just talking metal. So as soon as we shift both of these amplifiers into metal mode, the different parameters that they have to sculpt the tones in that mode you know, there's a difference between them. You know, I mean, there's definitely more tricks in the bag regarding the JP. So now let's go ahead and turn off the EQ on both of these amps. In other words, I'm turning off this section right here with the graphic EQ. And at this point, we're going to see how they compare with it off. So you can hear the preamp section in both amps and hear how they compare. Okay, so that's how they compare with the EQ, the graphic EQ bypassed. And let me make sure I have them set up the same. So I have the bass all the way down on the JP and on the Mark VII. Take a look at the settings again. So the picture that you're seeing right now with the JP is not the settings that I'm using. So don't judge it by the picture that you're seeing right now. That's just a general picture of the amplifier. So trust me, they're set up exactly the same. And yeah, I'd say that the JP has more low end than the Mark. So maybe that's why it's a little looser. And maybe they put that low end in there to attenuate for the shred mode that they added to the amplifier. Because the shred mode definitely cuts a lot of that out and tightens it up. So maybe they needed that extra clay to sculpt with, if that makes sense. So I'd say between these two, again, they're very, very good. So I hope this helps you make the best decision for you when you're choosing between these two amps. Or if you already own the JP and you want to add the Mark VII to your collection, I mean, there's definitely some differences there. They're not huge differences, but depending on, you know, how important those differences are to you, you might want to, you know, add it or take a pass to add it to your collection. Okay, so now let's switch the Mark VII into Mark IV mode and compare that to the JP Mark II-C Plus. Okay, so in the Mark IV mode on the Mark VII, it's a little thicker than the 2C mode, and it has a little more bottom end, a little more body fullness. It's slightly looser and less focused, so because of that, it's a little more comparable to the JP Mark II-C Plus. So that was interesting. So the 2C mode in the Mark VII is a little tighter than the JP Mark II-C Plus, but the Mark IV mode in the Mark VII is a little more comparable regarding tightness to the JP Mark II-C Plus. All right, so now let's put the JP back into shred mode and see how that compares to the Mark IV mode on the Mark VII. Okay, in that comparison, I think I preferred the Mark IV mode and the Mark VII. The JP, I think the top end got a little out of hand here. Maybe I should take that treble down even more and see how that compares. So now I got the treble, I don't know, about 2 o'clock on the JP. Let's do that comparison again. All right, so between the Mark IV mode on the Mark VII and the JP with the shred on, I preferred the Mark IV. I think in comparison, I started hearing a little too much high end in the JP. I mean, again, you guys are seeing me kind of do this and learn things on camera here and get used to things. And I'm kind of thinking that the shred mode's cool. Depending on how you dial in the amplifier on the JP, you can make it work for you. It's pretty aggressive, pretty bright. Maybe I'll have to adjust some faders on it to make it work better for me. I want to keep these in the same setting so I can compare them properly, you know. So now let's kick on the boost. Let's go ahead and use the mud killer and bypass the shred mode on the JP, because, oh my God, that would be something else, combining that with the shred mode. And then I'm going to take the treble up to top dead center, as you see here on, you know, both amplifiers, so that they're set up better for an overdrive pedal. And let's see how they compare in those settings with an overdrive pedal. And again, we're in Mark IV mode on the Mark VII. Okay, now that we have the overdrive pedal engaged, we need a little more low end, so I'm going to put the bass back in a little bit here. Let's just go up to 9 o'clock on both amps, because it's a little cold without the bass turned up a little bit. So let's see how they compare now. Yeah, that's better. You know, when you're engaging a boost, you definitely want some low end to sculpt, so you want to turn that up a little bit. But yeah, I think they're very comparable in the Mark IV mode, more than they are in the 2C mode. I mean, the Mark IV definitely fills up a little bit more with the Mark VII amplifier, so it keeps up with the low end on the JP a little bit better. But yeah, so I mean, they both sound really freaking good. So I think either one of these amps would be a great choice for you. And if you really want that Mark IV mode, I mean, yeah, get the Mark VII. I mean, I'm definitely digging the Mark IV mode on this amp big time. I think it keeps up really well with the JP. I think they're very comparable on pretty much everything so far. All right, so real quick, let's compare the clean channels without and then with effects. I've had some requests to do that, so let's go ahead and do that now. And I have both amplifiers set up exactly the same, and the clean channel on the Mark VII is in fat mode. All right, so they're very, very close. Let's just dress them up with some chorus and delay and compare them with that. Yeah, very, very close. I think both clean channels are freaking awesome. So either amp would work for you on that. I mean, I think you have a little more, you know, tonal options on the clean channel with the Mark VII, because you have the fat and clean mode, and you also have a crunch mode. So you have that as well. So a little more, you know, a little more options for you, but I think both clean channels are excellent. All right, so now let's do a quick comparison between the Mark V 25 in Mark IV mode and the Mark VII in Mark IV mode. This ought to be pretty interesting. So I have the Mark V 25 set up in the best settings that I can have it in. I mean, it's just, I think it sounds optimal in those settings, and it's very close to the settings on the Mark VII here, but let's just see how they compare. And that's with the overdrive on. Let's turn the overdrive off. And I'm gonna do the old treble crank here on both amps and see how they compare now. Okay, so, you know, it's funny with the Mark V 25, it's a great amp. It really is. But when you compare it to its bigger counterparts, I mean, you definitely hear where it's lacking. I mean, it's 25 watts. It's kind of falling apart right now in comparison. And the top end is kind of nasally and fizzy and overly compressed in comparison to the Mark IV mode in the Mark VII. The Mark VII just has, obviously it's got bigger transformers, it's 90 watts, you know, it's going to have more breathing room and be more open and less compressed and nasally at the top end. So I would say that the Mark VII and Mark IV mode eviscerated it. I mean, it wasn't even a contest. But again, I'm comparing it to a 25 watt amplifier. So I would hope that the Mark VII 90 watt would be better. That would be a problem if it wasn't. But yeah, so that was kind of a cool comparison between the two. I wondered how they would compare myself. So let's just hear one more quick riff between them both with the overdrive pedal engaged, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I honestly think that between the JP and the Mark VII, you know, there's some pretty big differences in some ways, and in some ways there aren't. I mean, the JP, the features I like in the JP is the fact that it has the flexibility that guys like me like. I mean, if I'm looking for a great metal amp that's made by Mesa Boogie anyways, the JP is always going to be one of my favorites because it has the flexibility that I like. It's got 3 independent channels, 2 assignable graphic EQs, and I can really have a ton of tonal options for me when it comes to that kind of, genre of playing. I mean, I'm not paying for a bunch of channels or modes that I would never use. So yeah, I mean, you have more flexibility regarding music genres and different types of guitars and stuff like that with the Mark VII. But if you're kind of a one-trick pony like me, that stuff doesn't really matter to you. You know, it doesn't matter to me at all. Although I do appreciate the fact that they put all the work into, you know, the Mark VII regarding how flexible it is with different genres and stuff. The Mark IV mode in the Mark VII is amazing. It's thick, fat, beefy, and it's got a lot of great aggression in it, great feel as well. I love the tone, it's amazing. And the 2C mode in it is also very good. It's a little more focused. So it's nice to have both of those awesome modes in one amplifier. So that's really, really awesome. I like that. And the clean channel is amazing. I have nothing bad to say about it at all. It's glorious. It's amazing. So, and then if you play in cover bands and you do a lot of different genres of music, maybe you'd want to pick the Mark VII over the JP, because you can definitely do a lot more different varieties of music with that amplifier. The JP is more of a rock metal type amplifier, and it has a lot of flexibility when it comes to those genres. And I'm sure you can do some low gain stuff with it as well. Just turn the freaking gain down, you know, and dial it in accordingly. But I'd say if you're more like me, you're more of a just a heavier player, I think the JP would probably be more suitable to your taste. You know, the shred mode's awesome. Again, do some fine tuning with that shred mode. If it's a little too harsh, just take the faders down a little bit on the graphic EQ, and maybe that would adjust for that. I didn't want to do all that in this video. I'm just doing quick shootouts between them, you know. So, but I'd say that they're both excellent amps, and they're different enough from each other where I can see how some guys would probably want to own both. You know, that Mark IV mode is pretty freaking cool in the Mark VII. It really is. So, so congrats to Mesa for making another awesome amplifier for all of us to enjoy. I think it's really good. And if you have a Mark V 25, I mean, like I do, I've owned its amp for a couple of years now. It's a great amp. It really is. It's just not going to keep up with the big boys, and that's to be expected, you know. It's going to have a different voicing and top end because of the way it's designed. It's just the way it is. But I think for what it is, it's a very respectable amplifier. I still think it's great. You know, it's just when you compare it side by side with bigger amplifiers, especially amplifiers that are, you know, of the same vein of it, you definitely hear how it's kind of lacking. But again, it's supposed to. It's only 25 watts. That's the dangerous thing about owning a switcher. You compare things directly and you start hearing stuff and you're like, man, I wish I could unhear that. Now I'm kind of bothered by what I heard, you know. But that said, I still think it's a great amplifier, especially considering the size and the low wattage that it has. Well, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this episode and got something out of it. I learned a lot just by shooting it myself, so I was glad to share those moments with you guys. And if you liked the video, please, you know, hit that thumbs up button. It really does help the algorithm. And I'm looking forward to seeing your comments below on what you thought of the video and the amplifiers and the shootout and all that stuff. And to all my subscribers and Patreon supporters, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, please do, and click the bell so that you can be notified every time I either go live or come out with a new episode. And if you want to support the channel, you can join my Patreon, and you can also buy some awesome Kemper profiles, Quad Cortex capture packs or preset packs, or even Line 6 Helix presets from me as well. The Line 6 stuff is available in the marketplace on Line 6's website, and all of my stuff is available regarding the Quad Cortex and the Kemper stuff is available on my website. There's a link below, tonewars.com. All right, well, I got a lot more stuff coming up for you guys, and I will see you on the next one.